Everything you experience about the world, every color, every sound, every single texture, it all comes to you through your senses. That's your only connection to reality. But what if that connection is leaving a whole lot out?
That's a massive question, right? But for what we're talking about today, let's just boil it down to this. Is the world that we perceive with our senses the entire world, or are we only getting a tiny, tiny fraction of what's actually out there? I like to think of it like this. Your senses, sight, hearing, all of them, are like a window you're looking through. It's how you see what's going on outside. But here's the thing about windows. They all have a frame. And that frame doesn't just define what you can see. It actively blocks out everything else. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the edges of that frame. So, let's start by exploring that window frame a little. We're about to see just how limited our view really is. And we'll start with some examples you might find, well, a little surprising.
We'll kick things off with the big two, sight and hearing. I mean, these are the senses we trust the most to give us a real, accurate picture of what's going on. But as you're about to see, even they have some pretty dramatic and measurable blind spots.
So let's go beyond what we think we see and hear. Let's look at the actual scientific limits of these senses. This is going to help us spot a really interesting pattern. Okay, so check this out. The world you see, all the colors, it's all painted from this incredibly narrow little sliver of energy called the visible light spectrum. But that's just it. It's a slice. An insect, like a bee, can see into the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. This means they see patterns on flowers that are completely invisible to us. They are literally living in a different visual reality. And it's the exact same story with hearing. Our ears are tuned to a specific frequency range, from about 20 to 20,000 hertz. Anything above that, ultrasound, is just silence to us. But for a bat or a dolphin, that so-called silent world is actually buzzing with information they use to navigate and hunt. The sound is absolutely there. We're just not equipped to hear it.
So, we're starting to see a clear pattern here, right? There are sights beyond what we can see and sounds beyond what we can hear. And that leads to a pretty fascinating question. Does this same pattern apply to the sense we use to physically interact with the world? Our sense of touch?
We usually think of touch as the ultimate reality check. I mean, if you can touch it, it's gotta be real, right? But is it possible that this sense has boundaries that are just as concrete as sight and hearing?
Think about this for a second. You're surrounded by air right now. It fills your lungs, you can feel it as wind on your skin, but you can't just reach out and feel a handful of it. Your hand just passes right through, registering nothing. Why is that?
Wow, this is a perfect example of what's called a sensory threshold. Basically, our sense of touch has a lower limit. If the molecules of something like air are too spread out, if it's just not dense enough, our nervous system literally can't perceive it. It falls below the minimum pressure required to trigger a sensation. The air is 100% real, but to our fingertips, it's nothing.
And this is where the idea gets truly mind-bending. Because if you accept that there's a lower limit to what you can touch, well, then you have to ask the opposite question. Could a material exist that is so unbelievably dense, so far beyond anything we normally experience, that it crosses an upper threshold of touch? Could something be untouchable, not because it's too thin, but because it's just too dense for our nerves to even register?
Now, I know the idea of an untouchable density might sound like pure science fiction, but it follows the exact same logic we just saw with our other senses. We know for a fact that there are sounds that are too high-pitched for our ears. They're real, they just don't register.
So let's break it down side by side. On one hand, you've got sound waves vibrating way too fast for your eardrum. On the other, you could have matter that's packed so incredibly tight that its properties are just beyond what our nerve receptors were built to process. The principle is exactly the same. It's a pretty strange thought, isn't it? Your hand wouldn't stop, because stopping is a sensation your brain creates. It would be like a ghost passing through a wall, only in reverse. The object would be so intensely real, so hyperdense, that it would become imperceptible to you, existing entirely outside the frame of your sensory window. So what's the takeaway from all this? Well, it means our entire understanding of reality is built on what might be a profoundly incomplete set of data. Now, this isn't proven fact, but it sure presents us with a fascinating puzzle of perception. And this is a genuine area of inquiry. Just like some animals can hear things we can't, could some other life form out there perceive densities we can't? Is it possible that with new technology we could one day expand our own senses to perceive these things? For now, they're just compelling, unanswered questions. Ultimately, it seems the reality we experience isn't the whole reality. It's more like a tailored version, filtered by our own biology. And that leaves us with a pretty profound final question to chew on. What other fundamental aspects of the universe are all around us, right here, right now, completely invisible and untouchable, simply because we don't have the senses to detect them?